All right. Okay, so the first thing we'll do today is to talk about the homework assignment, which I'm pretty sure many of you are looking forward to because we have not been doing any homework assignments for a while. All right, so I'm going to pass the roll sheet because I now remember to pass the roll sheet. Today is the 21st, which is the third column. I think Angela can start so that everybody else can follow the same column. So start right. Okay, so this is your homework assignment, which is applicable to many of your projects. Okay, so the idea of the homework assignment is not to give you some busy work, just to spend time with App Inventor, but to do something that your app may actually need to do. Okay, so in this case, the homework assignment is about setting up an account with username and password, and also later on use the account information for authentication. So you will have to store passwords along with usernames. We're only dealing with one single user. Okay, if you need to deal with multiple users, you can borrow the concept and use a list to maintain information for multiple users. Okay, so this is really, really basic. It has, but it gives you an idea of how to do it. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is to make sure you set up the project correctly, because I want you guys to use your own last name in lowercase and account as a word starting with an uppercase A as the name of the project. Okay, so you should replace your last name with your actual last name or family name in all lowercase. So in the case of myself, if I were to turn in something, the project would be called AUYEUNG, all lowercase, uppercase A account. Okay. So that's just clerical stuff. I just want to make sure that everybody who turned in the homework assignment has a particular name, because this makes it easier for me to test your programs. Because App Inventor does not allow multiple projects of the same name. So if you guys are turning projects with exactly the same name, I will have to delete existing projects to upload new ones. So this is going to solve that problem for me. This particular program is a single screen application, so you can do everything in screen one. I don't need you to have any splash screen or anything like that. It can be very basic. In screen one, which is your only screen, present the following visual components. You will need a text box or just a regular text box to prompt for username. Now, I did not specify that you have to show on the side that this is the username, this is the password, and this is the confirmation of the password. But you might want to add some additional labels just so that it's easy to differentiate what field is what field. Okay? But that's up to you. Okay? The bare minimum requirement is listed here. You will need two password text boxes because you need one for signing in, okay? And you need the second one for password confirmation, because you want to make sure that when people register, when they type in the password, they type in exactly the same password twice. And then you have two buttons, one button for setting up an account and one button for signing in, so that you can use an account that is already set up to sign in. So this is a description of what should be on the screen. Okay? So on the screen, as a minimum, you need to have a text box so that people can type in the username. You will need a password text box, which means when people type stuff, it will just dots will appear instead of the actual text. And then you need a second password text box just so that people can confirm they're typing the same password twice when people sign up for an account. Okay, and then you have the two buttons. Okay, the first button is setup, so label it setup, and then the second button is sign in, label it sign in. Now, how you want to actually name the components inside App Inventor is up to you. Okay, if you want to keep the same names as button 0, button 1, and button 2, and make it really hard for you to differentiate which button is which button, knock yourself out. Okay, but I would choose to use setup and sign in as a part of the name of the button, so it's easy to tell which one is which one. Okay. So the behavior of the program is listed here. If the setup button is clicked, then the first thing you want to do is to check to see if a user account is already set up. So you need to check with TinyDB, okay, and say, okay, do we already have an account set up? If that is the case, okay, then you want to use a notifier dialog box to confirm the overwriting of the account. In other words, you tell the end user and say, an account is already set up, do you want to overwrite that particular account? Okay. In other words, we only keep track of one account in this particular program. In your actual app, you might want to keep track of multiple accounts, so this logic may not apply to your actual program. And once you present the dialog box, this is the part that may be a little bit difficult, but we talked about this in the previous class already. You want to give the end user a choice, okay? In other words, the end user should be able to click OK to proceed with the overwriting of the existing account, or click cancel, which will have the effect of not doing any further action, okay? Not setting up a new account, just abort the entire thing. Are we clear on that concept? Okay. Now, it is not as simple as it looks like, okay, but we did talk about this in, I guess, several weeks ago. Now, if the end user decides to cancel the overwriting of the account, perform no further action, you're done with processing this button click. Otherwise, you continue with setting up the account. So when you set up the account, this is how we do it. The first thing we do to set up an account is to make sure that the two password text boxes are both filled in and they have exactly the same content. Okay, so you check these two, okay? Look at the text property of these two password text boxes. Make sure they are the same and make sure they're not empty. Because they can be the same because they are empty. So you have to make sure that they are not empty and they are actually the same. Are we okay on that concept? So we don't want empty passwords. Yep.
Yeah. Is there a block that checks if a field's empty?
You can come. I think so. We'll take a look at some of those components. Okay. If there's not, you can compare to the empty string. So that's one way to check. You can also get the length of the string. If it is 0, it is also empty. So there are multiple ways to check whether it's empty or not. If there's no such thing as is string empty, that might be one that checks just whether it's empty or not, but I'm not sure. And then what you want to do is to compute the Md5 hash or Md5 checksum of the password. And people may say, but we don't know how to do this. Well, did you get my email? What email? How many people got my email? And what is one of the things that I talk about in that email? There's only one thing actually. Md5, right? Okay, so you just have to open it up, which we'll do today in the class. We'll open it up and we'll take a look at how it is done. Okay? Yes.
Where is your email?
I sent it to whatever email account you use on this campus. So if you go to apps.losreals.edu and check your Gmail from there, it should be there.
No. I got the old emails from old professors, but not some.
Are you employed
No.
in any way on this campus?
I am, but I'm as a student help.
Okay, if you're a student help, you have an employee account, so you should check your Exchange server.
No. I have this just regular account.
Okay, so have you checked your apps.losreals.edu place?
Yes.
And it's not there?
I always check it each day because the other professors call.
Okay, well, okay, can you remind me to check this when we get to the lab?
Okay.
Because if you're an employee, it might be defaulting to the Exchange server. No?
Because no, I don't have enough.
Did anyone else, at least one person, get my email? Okay, so I did send it out from Moodle. It's just that somehow it's not reaching you. So we'll check. We'll find out why it is not getting to you.
You mean just one out of whole class, or just me?
I shotgunned one message to the entire class.
Well,
So you should have received it along with the rest of the class.
I definitely got it.
It was for a link to the gallery where you can
Yes.
download the app.
Yep. So when you go to the news forum, you can check on the news forum as well. Okay. So I sent this just yesterday in the evening at 10:14, and the title is Md5 Hash Project, and in it includes a link to the gallery. Okay. So we'll look into that. Okay. Because that's really important. Okay. So getting back to here. So you need to compute the Md5 hash or checksum, however you want to put that, of the password. and then store the username and the password in MD5. Okay, do not store the password in plain text, but the MD5 hash of the password in TinyDB. So I should be a little bit more clear here. It is not the password itself, but the MD5 hash of the password. So store that, which is just a string, into TinyDB. And how you want to organize your TinyDB is up to you. Okay, if you want to use one tag for username and another tag for password, you can do it that way. Okay. But on the other hand, if your goal is to be able to track multiple users and multiple passwords in your own app, then you can probably use a list of key value pairs so that you can actually reuse that code in your own project. Okay, but I do not specify how to store these two items, so it's up to you guys to decide how you want to do that. And when this is all done, use a dialog box from the notifier to confirm the end user and say, okay, your account is now set up. That's all you need to do. Do we have any questions about what happens when the setup button is clicked? Any particular step here that you want me to clarify or spell out a little bit more?
So in email you explain how we compute the MD5 checksum.
Yes. Yep. Well, we'll do that today as well. So, but I want to give you guys a link to the project first. So for people who have some time last night and just want to kind of glance over that, they can just glance over. So by today, those people would have some idea of what I'm going to talk about. Okay. So what if the sign in button is clicked instead? Well, the first thing you need to do is to check to see if a user account is already set up. Because if no account is already set up, then you have to tell the end user. Use the notifier to let the end user know that no account is already set up and perform no further action because you cannot sign in without an account already set up. Okay? And once again, I'm leaving up to you to decide how you want to implement the checking of whether an account is already set up. Okay? You can use the default value when you get something back from TinyDB. You can get the tags from TinyDB and see if the tag corresponding to username is there or not. Okay? And if you use a list of key value pairs to track multiple users, you can get the list back and see if the list is empty. Okay, so depending on how you store the username and the password, you can choose a different way to do it over here. So I'm leaving it up to you guys to implement the actual low-level mechanism, but I'm just describing what needs to be done. Okay, so if an account is already set up, you basically want to continue the sign-in process. To continue the sign-in process, the first thing you need to do is to retrieve the username already stored in TinyDB. In this particular homework assignment, there's only one username that you need to track, so it's pretty easy to retrieve that. But in your own app, if you need to maintain multiple users, then you need to match the entered username against the username on your list to see if it is one of those usernames. Does that make any sense? Okay, but this is a simplified version, so it's a lot easier to implement. You also want to retrieve the MD5 hash of the password corresponding to that user, which is also stored in TinyDB. It may or may not be in the same tag, depending on whether you want to use the concept of a list or a key value pair list in the implementation of TinyDB. And then the next thing you want to do is to compute the MD5 hash of the password entered in the first password text box. So that would be this one here, okay? Not this one, but this one. And then after that, you want to compare the entered username against the stored username. So you basically use the first text field and compare that to the username already stored in TinyDB. Yep.
Should it only have the second confirm password box when you're signing up and not?
But you don't know which button the end user is going to click. Yeah.
So maybe it could be invisible until they click setup, and then it gives them the extra field or something.
Then it gets a little bit more complicated because then you have to continue the operation once they enter the second password field. So I'm just going to make this easy by having all fields, all the three fields up. Because the idea of this homework assignment is not to actually make the screens for signing in or setting up accounts, because you can do that with your own different screens. The idea of this one is how do you apply the MD5 function. I just want to make sure that people know how to integrate the HTML document and use a web viewer component to process the MD5 hash. That's the purpose of this homework assignment. Yep.
Do we need to compare the two passwords if they click sign in?
Not the two when you're signing in, because when you sign in, we only use the first one. We ignore the second password text box. So what you need to do now is to compare the MD5 hash of the entered password against the MD5 hash that you have stored corresponding to that particular user. So you're comparing two things, okay? First, you need to make sure the username matches the username already stored. The second thing is the computed MD5 hash of the password entered has to match the stored MD5 hash. So they both have to match in order to proceed. If at least one of the comparisons does not match, then you have to use a notifier dialog box to let the user know that authentication has failed. You do not want to indicate how it failed. In other words, you don't say, oh, this user does not exist, or the user is there, but the password does not match. Because you don't want to give the end user any clue as to why authentication failed. Okay, so that's a typical thing that you want to do with any type of authentication. It is not required in this homework assignment, but if for those of you who want to take on kind of like a challenge, you want to say, okay, you want to count the number of consecutive failed attempts to log in. Okay, so you basically say, okay, this is one failed login. Oh, the next one is successful. Reset the counter. But anytime you have like 3 or 5 consecutive failed attempts to log in, then you set up a timer. You gray out all the controls and say, okay, you cannot attempt another login for 5 minutes to deter people from trying to guess the password and stuff like that.
Where you throw them into your IP table and tell them they can't log in again.
Well, yes, but in this case, because it's a tiny DB thing, you can't really just lock out the IP address. Yes, but your bank would do that. Your bank would actually just lock you out completely, and just say call us or walk into a branch to reset it, which is the proper thing to do. Oh, this reminds me of one thing. It is kind of related to computer science, but not with apps. My wife received the email from her workplace last night, and it says, okay, your account, there's a problem with your account. Go ahead and send us your username and password so that we can confirm that. And because she was really tired at the time, she fell for that.
Oh.
And then 15 minutes later, she go like, oh my goodness, what did I do? So she immediately went in and changed the password. So the damage was done, but it was minimal. And then she sent another email to IT just to explain the situation, so that if there's any further damage done, IT can assess what is being done and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yep.
How did she tell IT that she fell for the phishing scam?
Well, because a lot of people in the state government probably would fall for that, so she's lost in the noise.
Plus, when they're attacking your company, you want to make the company aware so that they can raise awareness within the company.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that other people
Of
don't.
course, I see why she called, but I'm trying to imagine how I would
The
explain
conversation.
that. Yeah.
I think she just explained exactly what happened. This is the email that I got, and this is the reply that I sent, and then I realized this is a phishing attempt, and I changed my password at this time, and then let IT decide what they want to do. I mean, they have to do whatever that needs to be done, right? All right. So if both the username and pass and MD5 hash, pass MD5 hash, if both of those match, use a notifier box to let the end user know the authentication has succeeded. And then there's nothing else to do. This is the entire homework assignment. Once you sign in, you just say, okay, you're signed in. That's all. There's nothing else to do. So are there any questions about what your program is supposed to do, the behavior of your program and what it should look like? No questions? Okay. Note that you will need some non-visible components in this project. Furthermore, you may need additional event handlers. So in addition to the 2 button event handlers, you probably will need one more. Okay? Not going to say which one because it is your homework assignment. Okay? But when you go through this process and start to implement the program, you will realize and go like, hey, what do I do here? And that's when you need to come up with it with the other event handlers. Yep.
The project you put into the gallery, the MD5 last night,
Uh-huh.
is that our starting point? So we're gonna open up that
You can
file.
borrow any code you want from that particular project.
Okay.
So you can download that project and import it into your projects, change the name of the project to whatever is needed for this homework assignment, and use it as a starting point. That is perfectly okay. Yep.
Can we also use the HTML file that you had in that assignment? The
Yeah.
one that has the MD5
Yep,
hash?
yep. Nothing is copyrighted. You can basically use anything that is in that project. Okay. All right. So we are close to the end here. When you're done, export the project and submit only the AIA file for the homework assignment. I don't need anything else, just the AIA. I do not need the APK file. Okay, so do not turn in the APK file. I just need the AIA file. So the project will be graded using a rubric system, and I will check conformance to each and every single specification listed in the homework assignment. And that's it. That's how the homework is going to be graded. Are there any questions regarding the homework assignment? Any questions about the homework assignment? Okay, so now there are two things that I want to share. We have quite a bit of time today. So the first one is I have successfully installed Android Studio. Okay, remember last time I was trying to install Android Studio, it would not let me do it. Okay, and I was thinking that I did something wrong, but it wasn't me. Remember last time the button was grayed out? No matter what I do, the button was grayed out, and I was trying to find out, okay, just give me a list of files to download. I can choose for myself. Thank you very much. And there was no such list, right? And now it is not grayed out anymore. So I think it is something on their side. They messed up on the server side, how they decide whether your system can run Android Studio or not. It took them probably about 24 hours because I tried yesterday in the afternoon and the link was up again. So I'm good. I'm pretty sure in Windows, and Mac OS 10, those links, start to work, from the get-go. So you guys can install it if you want to. And I want to show you guys what it looks like once you install it and how to run it, at least from Linux. From Linux, things are always kind of command line based, and it doesn't look good, but it does work. So I'm going to show you guys how it looks like. So inside the bin folder of Android Studio, there's a script called studio.sh. So you just start up the script, and it will typically just start import from a previous version. I do not. Okay. It's the first time I started up on this particular live setup. I copied everything from my desktop computer. So it's kind of new, but not exactly new. Okay, there we go. So we'll leave it running for a little bit when I explain the project, because this may take a little bit of time. So I'll go ahead and go back to the gallery, and well, I don't have to go to the gallery because I have signed in as myself here already. Okay. Nope, not one of these. Okay, need to 16 fall. Okay, here's the MD5 project. Well, look at the viewer. Most curious. There we go. Huh. Okay. Well, at least it seemed to work this time. Okay, so the first thing you might want to notice is in the media portion of this project, I have one single file called md5.html. Now, as you might guess, something .html is an HTML document, and that it is. But when you open this as an HTML document, the content may surprise you a little bit. So we'll just download. You guys can do the same thing if you just want to examine the content. I guess this may not be the best editor. Okay, well, it's going to be okay for now because I don't need to actually read every single line. So you can see this is an HTML document because it starts with HTML and ends with the /HTML. It has an empty head and for the most part an empty body. But inside the script, I have the JavaScript that I borrowed from somebody else. Okay, so this is definitely not my code. It is from somebody else. And if you scroll all the way down, the only part that is important is the last line here. I guess you guys cannot see that. Okay, we'll do it the other way. And we'll open it with mouse. So /user in mousepad. There we go. All right, much better. So when we scroll all the way to the bottom, the last part here, the last line before the end of the script element is the only line that is kind of important. Because what we do is we use the JavaScript function, which is provided by this particular web viewer component. It's called window.appinventor.setWebViewString. And then inside, you basically specify what do we want it to become. It becomes the output of the Md5 function, and what I feed to the Md5 function is very much the same thing, except one is a get, the other one is a set. It is also the web view string. So in other words, I'm using the web view string property of App Inventor as a way to get information into and also out of the JavaScript. Okay. Yep.
Is that property in the component?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So there is a web view string property in a web viewer component.
Okay.
So I'll show you the code in the blocks as well. Okay. And then somebody may say, well, but nobody told me that I have to learn JavaScript to take this class. You don't. I'm showing you this only for those people who decide that you might want to change this code because you have some other thing that you want to do in JavaScript and you want to adapt this to do something else. But if you don't want to do anything else and you just want to do MD5 conversion, you don't need to read this stuff here. So if you don't need to read this stuff, you don't need to change anything here. What do you need in order to compute MD5? You go to blocks, okay? And it looks complicated only because I want to disable stuff, certain things when they're not supposed to be active. So, but you will need to borrow, a good portion of this. The first thing we have here is a timeout counter. And if you look at this, if you see a question mark bubble here, you can click it. This is how you can enter comments for your own blocks. Okay, so if you don't have this already, okay, let me show you exactly what you can do. So if this is not already there, you can just right-click on any block here and then click on Add Comment. And that block, that little bubble, will now appear. When you click the bubble, it gives you a little text box, so you can now enter text to describe that block. So I would just enter here, triggers the computation of the Md5 hash of the text in the text box. Okay, so you can leave comments to yourself, so that later on when you look at your own code, you will remember what it means. Okay, what is the context of that code. All right. So I leave comments just about everywhere in this program, and you might want to click on some of these, especially at places where it looks kind of like, okay, what is this block doing? Click on the bubble and see if that explanation is well enough. Okay, at least gives you a starting point. So when the compute button is started, the first thing I do is to disable the text input, the input box, and also the button itself, because I don't want the end user to have any ability to change anything after the button is clicked. So from the time the button is clicked to the time the Md5 hash is actually returned, I don't want any user interaction. So I gray out the text box, I gray out the button, so those two things can no longer be active anymore. Are we okay with that? Okay. Now, whether you want to use this in your own project, hey, it's up to you. And then the next thing I do here is this is the most crucial part, or one of the most crucial part is this one here. The web viewer is just one component. It's under user interface. It's a web viewer component. So I set the web view string property of the web viewer to the text in the input text box. That's all I did. Okay. So this is the way for you to pass information into the JavaScript script inside the HTML document. You basically set web view string first before you trigger the execution of the HTML document. Are we okay with this? This is how, go ahead.
Is that kind of like making it a variable? I mean, making that item, that property
Yeah.
a variable?
Yes.
Okay.
It's basically a property of the web viewer component, but it is accessible inside the JavaScript that is running inside the web viewer. So that's your conduit. Is that okay or not?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. So once we set this, then we can use the go home method with web viewer, which basically goes back to the URL that is already set as the home URL. I would look at that later and describe. There's one little thing about that you have to you really have to know, but but this is triggering the execution of the script. Yep.
Would you be able to send like arrays or lists through the web view string as well?
Yes. This is when JSON comes in very handy, because you can only pass a string from app inventor blocks into the JavaScript. But if you use JSON encoding, then you can encode a complicated, huge, whatever structure you want and pass it only as a long string. So that's when you combine what you know about JSON encoding with this particular mechanism. Inside JavaScript, do you think JavaScript has a problem with JSON? Because JSON is spelled as
JavaScript.
JSON, JavaScript object notation. So JavaScript naturally, can decipher JSON really, really well, okay? Because that's the origin of JSON to begin with, okay? So once you use JSON, you can use JSON to communicate between app inventor blocks and your JavaScript code. So that was a really good question, okay? So this will trigger the execution, but here's the problem. After this block go home, executes, it returns right away, because all it does is to make the request. Because in general, the URL of your web viewer is not a local file. In general, it goes out to the internet somewhere to retrieve a document and then run whatever code is in that document. So potentially it can take milliseconds, hundreds of milliseconds, and App Inventor is not going to wait. App Inventor sends out a request and then immediately go on to the next box, which means by the time you get to this block here, this script may not even be loaded yet. You have no idea of when that script is done. So the only thing I can do here is to set up the global countdown timer. And I choose 5, and the timer period is set to 200 milliseconds. So together, it means after 5 periods, each has 200 milliseconds, which means a combination of 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second. So after 1 second, if I don't get anything back, then I say, okay, something is wrong. Let's just report an error. Okay? Is that okay? But this is the complicated mechanism here, because I have to use a timer to see whether there is a result or not. Okay? Because the result is not there immediately.
Where is it going to show the error?
Later on, it's in the timer block. So then I also enable the timer block to basically say, okay, let's start the countdown now. Are we okay with that?
I'm just confused as to where it goes from the timer.
There's more code down below this.
It's a
Okay.
timer.
So at this point, we have to remember the purple block says, let's go to that web page. But I have no idea when I actually retrieve the HTML document, when I'm done executing the JavaScript. But it would immediately go to the next 2 blocks, which is basically saying, okay, let's set up the timer. Count 5 times, and each time is only 200 milliseconds apart to see whether we got a result or not. Yep.
Isn't the timer event then going to be triggered every 200 milliseconds?
Yes, but by default it is disabled. So until I click the button, the timer is not ticking.
And that's going to go, I mean, it's going to do that no matter what, whether it's retrieved the page
Correct.
or not.
Yes. So that means there's some logic in the timeout or the timer event that I have to do. So this is the timer event itself, or timer event handler. The first thing it checks is whether the timeout counter is less than or equal to 0. Because it keeps counting down. It goes from 5 to 4 to 3 to 1 and then to 0. But for whatever reason, if I've missed something and it counts to negative, I want to catch that too. I don't want to catch just 0. Anything that is 0 or less, I want to catch. So when it is less than or equal to 0, it means, okay, we have just timed out. We didn't get anything. So if I have timed out, I have a little procedure here that I made myself. Okay, I can show you that later. But re-enable doesn't really do a whole lot. All it does is to re-enable the button and the text box. But I turn it into procedure because there are multiple places where I need that logic, so I don't want to replicate that logic all over the place. And then the second part is just to crank out a little dialog box that says, okay, oops, we just timed out, we didn't get anything back. That's all it does. Okay. Are there any questions about what happens when we run out of time? Yep.
So we're checking 5 times, basically.
Yes, this thing would trigger 5 times, and the 5th time it triggers, it will say timeout.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so the else is corresponding to the condition when timeout counter is not less than or equal to 0, which means we still have time left. So in that case, the first thing it does is to compare web view string of the web viewer against the text of the text box. Because if it is still the same, it means it's not done processing yet. Is that making any sense? Now, it won't work in one really peculiar case. If you find some text string where it is its own Md5 hash, then this mechanism is not going to work. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, it's okay, just ignore what I said. Well, let's just do 15 seconds, okay, not the entire class.
We could go and make it so that it can't be that exact, like.
Right, you can have a little prefix or a suffix, that cannot possibly be in a hash. But I was lazy, I didn't do it. Because I was counting on the fact that no MD5, no string is its own MD5 hash. You can look it up and see if it's true or not. I just did not know, and I didn't bother to look. Okay. So I check whether they're equal or not. If it is equal, if they are exactly the same, that means I do not have my MD5 hash yet. Because remember how I set the web view string before I trigger going home to the URL? What did I do? How did I set the web view string? What did I set it to?
Text box.
I set it to the text of the text box, right? So if it is still the same as the text in the text box, processing is not done yet. Because when it's done, inside the JavaScript, it would have changed the web view string to the MD5 hash. And the premise that I'm basing on is no string is its own MD5 hash. So if that is the case, that means if the web view string is still the same as the text in the text box, then processing is not done yet. So if processing is not done yet, there's only one thing that I need to do, which is to decrement the counter by 1. It's like, okay, another 200 milliseconds has passed, I'm not getting the result yet. And just let the timer go on for the next time.
And that's why you use a global variable.
And that's why I have to use a global variable, because it has to, this is crossing the boundary of event handlers. Anything that has to cross event handlers need to be global variables. Okay. Next thing is the else statement. The else statement is basically saying, okay, the web view string is no longer the text in the text box. That means the script has done something, gave me a result. Okay, so in that case, I am setting the label. That's all I'm doing. I'm setting the label, the text of the label, to whatever the web view string is, and call re-enable. Re-enable, once again, is just re-enabling the text box and the button and a few other things. It also disables the timer, if I remember correctly, because you don't want the timer to keep ticking. So that's all it does. Is really just mostly just for user interface functionality. And that's pretty much the entire program, with the exception of the procedure called re-enable. I just want to show you that too, but that one is really simple. This is re-enable. So all it does is to turn off the timer, because we're done. Okay, we have concluded. Either we have just timed out and we're not getting any result back, or we have gotten the result back. But in either case, I don't need the timer to keep ticking anymore. So I turn the timer enable to false, so that it doesn't tick anymore. But at the same time, I'm re-enabling the text input and also the button, so that people can enter another piece of text and get the Md5 hash of that. Yep.
The to re-enable block, the block itself, did that come out of the procedures? Is that on the side, the built-in? Is it out of that control procedure?
You mean these?
Yeah, just the one purple, the big block.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, is that?
No, I defined it. So you can define your own procedure. Yeah, so if you go to the procedure drawer, okay, which is here, you can basically make your own procedure, which is a way to make your code look cleaner. Because instead of sprinkling, sequences of code that looks identical everywhere, you just have one single procedure to do it. So every time you want that sequence of things to happen, you just call that procedure.
Okay.
So that's a really typical way to clean up a program. So it looks easier. It looks nicer for one thing. It's also easier to debug and make changes in the future.
So what were the two different kinds of procedures that we had in there?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good question. The top one is okay, are you familiar with C and C++?
A little bit, yeah.
That's a void function. It returns a void,
Oh.
which means it has no return value. And then the second one is one that has a return value.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yep.
How do you get the return value
How do you get the return value?
in the procedure?
Okay. Because you see this not here is not the same thing as that.
Now open the procedure drawer.
You have to specify a value here.
Yeah. So
We call the procedure.
I can return a 0.
Now, if you call
And
that
then-
procedure, how do you
So
get
open the purple
Yeah.
and show him that there's.
Oh,
a-
okay,
there's a
okay,
new
sure.
call now.
Okay, so I can name this one, stupid 0. Okay, and let's say I want to use a 0 somewhere. Okay, maybe here. Okay, so instead of using a 0 as a constant, I want to use the result value of stupid 0.
okay.
So I go to procedures, I pick out call stupid 0,
Oh, I
and
got
stick it
it.
here.
the value?
Yep.
All right.
Are we good? All right. So let's go back and check on Android Studio and see if the setup is successful or not. Oh, it's the second tab right here. Yep, it is finished. Excellent. This is just like an infomercial, where I would talk about things, and then in the back I have rotisserie going and air fryer going and whatnot. And I also have the prepared dish too. I have the Md5 project already prepared, so I can show the audience. It's like, oh, this is what you can do with that rotisserie machine.
I just need to smell the chicken.
Yeah. Look at this. Okay, for some reason you cannot just start with a no project thing, so I'm going to have to start with one particular project, otherwise it won't present the main screen, which is what I need. Gradle, yep. All right. So of this entire screen, there's only one thing that is of importance to me, which is this little thing here. It starts up the Avd Manager, or Android Virtual Devices, and I don't have anything at this point, so I'm going to create one. So when you create an Android virtual device, unlike the one that is in Avd Manager, This one gives you like a gazillion options. Okay, you can pick out any one of these particular devices. So you can have phones, you can have tablets. We are not dealing with Wear in this class or TV, so I would just kind of stick with phone, for your virtual device. Since I have a Nexus 5, I'm going to use a Nexus 5 here, and I can say next. Okay. System image must be selected to continue. So did I not pick one? No, I have to pick one up here. So this one is up to you. This allows you to control which version of Android you want to use. So since Marshmallow is more common on more devices, I'm just going to pick Marshmallow and click the download next to it. There are two APIs. Okay, one is corresponding to the 64-bit version, and the other one corresponding to the 32-bit version. Once again, it's up to you. I would just pick the 64-bit version if you're already running a 64-bit operating system. So click this one. It might take a little bit of time to do it, depending on your network connection speed. Oh, look at this speed. At home, when I was doing this, and I have Shore West with a 20 megabits per second connection, it was crawling very slowly as my kids keep complaining, oh, the lag is killing me, because they were playing League of Legends at the same time. And my daughter would go like, see, I'm teleporting.
I have the same service you do, and yeah, if anybody's watching YouTube or anything, games are no fun.
Try Netflix.
Yeah.
YouTube is not as bad.
YouTube's only when it buffers, it seems
Right.
like, for some reason.
Yeah, but Netflix is really bad. You start up Netflix and you watch it on just a typical 1080p TV, and the whole house goes down, man. Okay, so this is all done. It's finishing something, because I got that selected already. What is it waiting for? I got it picked out already. Huh. It is not letting me proceed. Do I need to click it? Yep, there we go. Okay. So I have to download and click it to select it. Click next. Okay, so this screen allows you to change the name of the device. So if you don't need API 23, which identifies the version of Android that is running on that thing, you can delete it. I'm just going to leave all the default as it is. The only thing that you might need to change, depending on how your system is set up, is whether you want the emulator performance to have hardware acceleration or not. In this particular case, since I may not have the necessary driver installed, I'm going to pick software, which makes it a little bit slower, but it will still be functional. And then we click finish, and that's it. So now we have the AVD or Android virtual device all set up. Click the play button to get it started. And because this computer is really quite fast, it starts up pretty quickly. In fact, I would say that it starts up at least the same speed as an actual Nexus 5. So it's not slow at all. So this is great for people who want to do the project for this class, but without an actual device. So even if your app requires the use of, let's say, GPS, you can still do it here. You can actually inject your GPS location into the development platform. So you can actually say, okay, I'm going to inject, the cross section or the intersection of one place in New York City. You can do that. All right. This is actually faster than a real device. My Nexus 5 does not start up as quickly. So you just go here. So this is all done. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is to build the app and run here. Okay. Same process as last time. Different ways of looking for ADB. Okay. So let me go back to a command line interface, and I'm just going to pick one that is not used at this point. So you first have to go to the folder where it is installed. In this case, you have to go to the SDK directory. Not sure whether this is the case with the newer installs or not, but you have to go to this. You have to go to the platform tools folder, and then inside that folder is ADB. So the first thing I do, is to check devices, just to make sure that the virtual machine is attached, and it is. Okay. So now I can do exactly the same thing as what I usually do in this class. I go back to App Inventor inside the browser, and we click Build and save APK. And then we use the install option of ADB to install the app into the virtual machine. Are there any questions about this whole this process? The only reason I downloaded and installed Android Studio is to get to the AVD, get to the Android virtual device. Yep.
Will that emulator, will it have internet access? Is there any way to make it do that?
Yes, it does.
It does?
In fact, since it's doing stuff like here, I can go back to the Android virtual machine over here, and you just, okay, I'm going to save the file over here first into the temp folder. That's fine. So you can start up the browser inside the virtual machine. It should be connected, just like any device, because before you get here, you can actually say whether you want to enable the cell signal or not. So you can control basically all aspects of the virtual machine. But since the default is heavily connected, so that's why the virtual machine actually has internet access. So all of these things that you normally do on the regular phone will work the same way. So you can actually Google search here. You can Google search for App Inventor.
Keyboard still doesn't work?
Yeah, a little bit small, slower. And it will find App Inventor. Yeah, so it works pretty much the same way. I think there is a way to attach your webcam to the virtual machine. So when you use the camera of the virtual machine, you're actually seeing out of your webcam. So that way you can put your webcam and look at the QR code. You can see how this can be kind of convoluted, but it seems to be able to work. Yeah.
Is there a way of opening up either an APK or the AIA in Android Studio? So essentially taking a project from App Inventor and then finishing it off or polishing it off within.
No, there's no way to convert an App Inventor project in Android Studio.
Okay.
So there are no easy way to do it. There are programs out there that will allow you to open an APK file, get the Java bytecode file, and then it will decompile the bytecode file back into Java source file. So there are programs that can do that. They're floating around already, so you can do that. But it will give you kind of really strange variable names because it's systematic. It doesn't know what the variable means. So the names of the variables are meaningless. But it will still give you the general structure of the code and stuff like that. So you can start with that, but I wouldn't even bother with that. I would just start from scratch and write it in Android Studio if I have something like that. Okay, so getting back to what we were doing, the download is done already. So what we need to do is do the same thing, ADB install -r, and then where the file is, the APK file. This one is md5.apk. Press the enter key. It would install it all inside the virtual machine. So when I click on the virtual machine, I should see MD5 as one of the apps now. So here's the app. Click the app, and it starts up the app here. And now I can just click here and see if I can type on my actual PC keyboard. Okay. Nope, doesn't work. And it does something else. Probably something that. Okay. So I will just say try, and even has all the spell check and whatnot. Is out. There we go. Okay, then you can click the button, and it computes the checksum. So are there any questions regarding any items that we have talked about today? Okay, first question. Let me just check whether you understand the concept or not. Do you need to know JavaScript to get this homework assignment done? No. Do you have a basis to start on your project? Do you know where to find that? Okay, very good. I just want to double check and make sure that everybody has a starting point for this particular project. So your job is not to get the Md5 hash part to work because it's already working, as we can see. So what your project is really just to get the TinyDB, the matching, that sort of thing to work, which I think is great for many of your own projects because many of you actually have projects where you probably want to have a sign-in process for the end users. So you can basically use this as an opportunity to figure out how to get it done in your own project. Yep.
Is it common for in production apps where they hash out the username too before sending it? So you're hashing not only the password but the user.
Right, but remember from last discussion on Monday, MD5 is no longer considered safe because of the rainbow table.
Okay, yeah. So let me rephrase my question. Not using MD5, but using the encryption that's used now. Do you usually encrypt both the user and the password before sending it out?
That's a good question. Okay, if you encode both, that means when you store the username, you do not store the username as plain text anymore. On the database, you'll be storing the hashed version of the username.
Correct.
Yeah. So you can do that too. So both the username and the password will be hashed. So this way it is hard to reverse both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So people cannot even know what usernames they're dealing with when they
Right.
get even if they get the database, they don't know okay, let's try this username. Nope, they don't know exactly what the names are to begin with.
Is that common or is that practice or that's my question? Is that the proper way of doing it for security?
I'm not aware of the practice, so I'm not sure. I cannot answer that for sure. But I think if they can reverse one, they can reverse the other. In other words, encrypting or hashing the username does not give you additional protection. Because if they can hack the database and get to the hashed version of the passwords, they can get to the hashed version of the username as well. If there's a way to reverse one, there's a way to reverse the other one. Yep.
But if you're using a public and private key, isn't everything in the transmission encrypted anyway?
That is correct.
So
If you use key pair encryption.
Password, everything's encrypted.
Yep. So, but then you will need to
the other
implement
side,
the
right.
key pair encryption algorithm on your app side,
Right.
because you'll be transmitting the encrypted password to the other side.
Right.
But if you're dealing with only one device, then you still have a problem because now you need both keys to be on the very same device because it's self-contained, which also means if they can hack into your device, they will get both the keys, and that defeats the entire purpose of having key pair encryption.
Okay.
Yep.
How can you view inside the TinyDB or the Firebase just to see it stored?
Okay, so let's answer that question by asking the question, where do you start? Okay, so if I know there's something I should be able to do in TinyDB, how would I go about doing it? How do I find it? Well, there are two ways to start, okay, depending on how you would like to do it. Some people like hands-on, and some people like to read first. So depending on how you want to get things done, you can either read the description here, okay, and click on more information, and that will tell you everything that you can do with a TinyDB, but it's in text. It's just describing what you can do, okay? Some people like to read first before they do something. Other people like to, okay, let's dive in and find out what we can do. So those people can drag a TinyDB component into your app here, switch to the blocks, and then go to TinyDB1, click on it, and then find out what you can do here. So either way is fine. I mean, it's up to you to decide how you want to do it. Okay, then you look at all of these things and go like, well, I have no idea what they mean. Okay, what do?
Go to the
You
text.
hover over. You go back to the text, or you can just hover over one of these blocks and find out what it's describing. So when you hover over clear all, it says it's clearing the entire data store. So that means all the tags will be gone if you call clear all. You can clear a particular tag. You can get all the tags in. Okay. Now when you use get tags, it will return a list of all the tags. So you can actually use this as a mechanism to see if a username is already stored, because it returns a whole list, right? So you have to go through the list to see if the tag that you're interested in is in the list or not. And when you look under all the things you can do with list, there's a way to do it. There's one block to do it already. So that's one way to do it. You can also use get value and specify what tag you're getting it, what tag you're using to get it from. And then you have to remember to specify value if tag not there correctly. So this way you can look at the actual value that is returned and see if it got it from the TinyDB or whether there's no such thing in TinyDB and the default value is returned instead. So is that answering your question?
Where is it going to be displayed? All the whole list of everything stored in the TinyDB? If you grab it, how are you going to view it?
You do not view it. There's no need to view it. You just have to see if the username is already stored in TinyDB or not.
I think to answer your question, you could probably put a label up there, and then whatever information you're retrieving, send it to the label. And just have it, like, print to screen almost, that type of deal.
Yeah. A notifier will work good too. You just reuse your notifier every time you want to debug something.
Yep.
So you could have it show up in like an alert.
Yep, but it's going to return a list. If you use get tags, it's going to return a list. So what you do with the list will be under here. So you look at these things and see which one is going to be applicable. So I'm just going through this list here.
Or you could go find that TinyDB database file and look at what that's
Yep,
actually in the
you
file.
can go to the text file as well, just to this will work too. Returns true if the thing that you're looking for is an item in the list. So if you know the name of the tag that you use for the username, you have a list of all the tags in TinyDB, then you use this block here and say, okay, is the username tag in TinyDB? Is it a yes or no? So there are many ways to do it. You have to choose a way to get it done. Okay? Is that
Yeah.
okay? All right. Okay. Any other questions about the homework assignment? Nothing yet? Everything is okay so far? All right. Oh, I forgot one last thing that is kind of important. And it has to do with how do we refer to this HTML document, okay? So that depends on whether you are using AI Companion or not, okay? Now this is a single screen app, so you don't need to use the method that I used here. You can use AI Companion to get this done. But if you use an AI Companion, then you have to make some changes to the web view component. So I'll show you guys exactly what I mean by that. This is the web viewer component, and inside, this is how I specify the URL of the file. You start with file, a colon, and then 3 slashes to mean that the following thing is a special item, and then you specify Android_asset, and then md5.html. This path only works if you are dealing with an individual app that is not running inside AI Companion. So the way I upload this APK file to install it, this is intended for deployment like that. If you use AI Companion, then the path name has to change. It's no longer going to be the way that is specified here. It's going to be something else.
What was AI Companion again?
AI Companion is, okay, so let me go back to here. If you use any one of these options to connect, you are using one form of AI Companion or another. Okay? On the other hand, if you use any one of these methods, then you are using the deployment method. So one is for development, the other one is for deployment. Connect is for development, and then build is for deployment.
And that URL is different if you're...
Correct. So if you're using this method, you will have to change the URL to something else. And I think there's documentation somewhere to describe what you need to set it to. So let me see if I can find that. I think it is in the web viewer documentation, so I'm going to look through that and see if I can find it.
For turn it, you want it done this way, though. Right?
Sorry?
When we turn it in, you want it done this way?
Yes,
You're not going to test on AI Companion.
that's correct. So let's see. It doesn't say here, but there are links out there that can show you too. App Inventor, development URL file. That should do it. Maybe not this one. There we go. Okay, so if you're using AI Companion, this is how you do it. So basically the first part here is going to be the prefix of your file. So it has to start with file : // MNT for mount / SD card / app inventor / assets, and then the name of the file that you want to refer to. This is for development. Okay, so if you use the connect thing on top of app inventor, this is what you need to use. On the other hand, if you use build, which is the deployment model or the production model, then you use this part here as the prefix, which is file : / Android _ asset, and then the file name after that. Okay, is that okay? Yep.
This is because when we're using Companion, it's not honor.
Correct. When you're using AI Companion, everything actually belongs to AI Companion because your app is not running on its own. The app that is actually running from Android's perspective is AI Companion.
Okay.
So that's why the path is under the path of App Inventor itself, which is the companion part. But when you deploy, then your app has its own folder. Then you can find all your assets under your own folder, under the app's own folder. So there's the difference. Some people, they make their app sensitive, so it can actually tell whether it's in deployment mode or in development mode, and then they will use a different string. I don't think you guys need to go that far. Okay, so just pick one.
Is there something that says this file exists?
Yes, when you read a file, it can return back whether it exists or not. But then you will have to expand the logic of your program to do that.
Right.
That's a good idea. Because to do that, to check whether a file exists or not, you are going to need a file construct. Under storage, you will need to use a file. So under the file, which also describes what I just talked about a little bit earlier, so you will have read from. Okay, so you have to use a read from to attempt to read the file, and then you have to, if a file name does not start with a slash. Okay, it doesn't quite say what if the file does not exist. Okay, I'm gonna have to. I cannot close the door because of the lack of circulation. Okay. They probably heard my footsteps walking out the door. Okay, let's go. Reminds me of a scene in episode 7 when Ren was throwing a fit in his office. There were 2 stormtroopers who were about to patrol past that door. They go like, and then immediately turn around and walk the other way. That's the only part that I like about that movie. I don't like the fact that Ren had to spend like a few minutes on what's his name, the stormtrooper. What's his name? They gave him a name. He only had a number to begin with. Finn. That's right. Finn. Okay, remember who Finn was? Okay, he was a stormtrooper who basically was just a janitor on the Death Star. That's what he said. He had no training whatsoever with the Jedi way or how to use the Force. He has no Force. He just grabbed a lightsaber and go like, okay, I'm gonna fight you, and then ran to spend a few minutes with him. Vader would have just flicked a finger, send him all the way to the wall, or so far that he cannot come back in anytime soon, and just go like, I'm not gonna deal with you. You're not worth it, man. Go away.
And you have to understand that Kylo Ren was in a lot of pain from Chewbacca's weapon, which has been shown to be really powerful.
Still lab.
It's that, huh?
Oh,
What did you say?
I didn't catch it. So anyway, that was a... But there's no way to tell whether the file is there or not, as far as I can tell. So when you say read from, it will attempt to read the file, and it doesn't say about the error condition, what happens when the file does not exist.
Can we use an event maybe?
Sorry?
Got text event indicates.
The got text event indicates the content from the file have been read. So this is kind of like the same setup as with the go home method of the web viewer, where you initiate the request, but it might take some time for the request to be done. So it is asynchronous. So you can use a timeout mechanism, I suppose. You can use timeout and just timeout. If you never get the got text event, then you just say, okay, the file does not exist.
And then you can try the other one.
But there's no clear and easy way to see if the file is there or not. Yep. Or as far as I can tell, there's no way to do it. All right. Any other questions about the homework assignment? No questions? Oh, that's right, one more thing. I put a link in Moodle for a reason. So when you go back to, advanced topics, because I'm putting a lot of things into advanced topics, because those are kind of advanced from the perspective of this class. This is a good one too. For those of you who want to kind of look into how to use the API of something in your app to refer to a resource that is either from Google or some other place where they have published an API, this is a really, really good example. This one is about books, okay? So in the app, the app needs to go to Google Books or books.google.com to retrieve information about your specific books. So it will initiate a search, but it will only pick the first item from the search to display, okay, to simplify things. So this is a really good example because it shows you what the API looks like. Okay, so it shows you the app itself. This part is pretty easy, and then it also shows you how the query is formatted, to communicate with Google. And this part here is particularly useful because it shows you the response that is coming back from Google. In other words, most of the time when you use a URL and go to Google and look for something, it returns back an HTML document, okay, which is formatted, looks nice and stuff like that, but it's really hard to parse from the perspective of the machine. But if you format your query in the API way, which is basically specify certain parameters, it will just come back as a JSON format. So this is all JSON, JSON, text, and in App Inventor, you can either decode the whole thing, and in this particular case, the author identified certain keywords that is needed by the app. So the app just look for these keywords and then just say, okay, give me whatever is between title and authors. Yep.
Does it do that with a list search?
No, it actually does it in a very awkward way. Okay, let me see if I can get back. Yep. Okay, so the way it did it is to use a split operation right here. So the way it was done is you use a split at first. So it's looking for a marker of the text that is actually needed and say, okay, split over there. So now your original text becomes two parts, right? And then it finds where it's supposed to end and then split the second part into two parts again. And then whatever's in the middle is the part that you need. So this is a really, I would say, it's a pretty bad hack of what really should have been done. but it works if you can find a distinct pattern in the return text. So it does work in some cases. It's just not really the best way of doing things. Okay?
Yeah, if the data changes and you end up having the same front.
Correct. Yep. So if Google changes the way that it is formatted just a little bit, it might mess up this code because things do not match exactly anymore. I also experimented a little bit with the concept of what?
What was the URL on that? Or how
It's in Moodle.
Oh, it's
So
in
inside Moodle, there's a link to that app already.
Okay, cool.
So you just have to go back to Moodle, go to Advanced Topics, and it's called Example of Google API.
Gotcha.
So it handles both the request and also the processing or the parsing of the reply from the API. Yep.
When we're working with our APIs that we find, we can just make the request on the browser, right? And it'll show us kind of what the data is going to look like.
Yes.
Okay.
So you can pre-test everything. Okay, this is the other thing you can do. Let me go back to this document here, because it provides a link of the actual query. So if you click that, it is as if you're, okay, look at this part here. Okay, I know you cannot see because of the contrast or the poor contrast. But if you click this link here, it opens up and it comes back. This is the actual response from Google live at this point.
Okay.
So you can actually play with the API a little bit and see what it looks like before you choose a way to parse it.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
In the JSON format like that,
Mm-hmm.
instead of grabbing the content and splitting and doing all the craziness that the app does, can you actually just call, the key? Like,
It depends on whether the API supports that or not. So if the API does not support just returning one of the item that you want, and it wants to come back with everything, then you will have to figure out a way to parse this and say, okay, I don't need the entire thing, I just need a piece of this. So the question now is, how do you get to the piece that you need?
gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah.
So next Monday, I can make it a point on next Monday to look at this whole thing here and say, okay, I can get this back into JSON. If I decode it from JSON, what does it look like in App Inventor? And how do I look up things in App Inventor, given that this is the source document? So that would be a much more proper way of looking for finding things that you need to find inside a JSON object.
And what are you going to use for that?
Huh?
What are you going to use for that?
When are you going to use?
To parse it instead of the way they
The decode is done by the web component. So the web component has a JSON decode method already, and it comes back with, in this case, a list. But it's not going to be a normal list, because a normal list cannot handle objects. When you see a key, a colon, and a value, it means this is an object. So in App Inventor, it doesn't have this notation, but it would use a key pair list instead of this notation. So it will look a little bit different inside App Inventor, but it will have an equivalent representation of what you see here. So on Monday, I'm going to go through the logic and say, okay, let's say we want to find the description of the book. How do I find the description of the book? Yep.
What does the assignment do?
In a week. So you have 7 days to work on it. Which also means, my recommendation is to start today in the lab, so that if you have any questions, you can ask the questions right away. And then on next Monday, you want to continue the project. If you have questions, you work on it over the weekend, you're stuck at some point, then next Monday we can talk about that, or I can look at your particular case during the lab time. So I would use the lab time for the homework assignment in this case. Okay. Any other questions? No other questions? So I'm hoping to see most of you in the lab working on the homework assignment at 12 o'clock.